The chamber of the Galactic Council rose like a cathedral built for gods. 1,000 voices murmured in the great hall, tones clicking, hissing, and echoing from creatures whose forms defied easy description. Their banners of empires glittered above their stations, emblems of power and heritage woven with light. Some bodies shimmered with scales, others rippled with metallic chitin, still others flexed wings or fins in gestures of silent dominance. They had seen countless disputes settled in this sanctum. They had witnessed empires rise and fall with words alone. But today, something unsettled them. A tension clung to the air, subtle but undeniable, as if the chamber itself knew an intrusion was coming. At the lowest end of the speaking floor stood a solitary figure draped in the navy uniform of Earth's fledgling diplomatic corps. A human. Upright, small by comparison to the behemoths of the council, and lacking claws, wings, or armor. The younger delegates whispered and sneered, unable to mask their disdain. Humanity had only joined the council a generation ago. Their fleets were small. Their colonies numbered in the dozens, not hundreds. They were tolerated, not respected. When humans spoke here, the assembly treated it as novelty, a curiosity of an infant civilization asking its elders for guidance. Many expected no different today. Yet the human did not stand with the posture of a petitioner. Hands folded neatly before them, chin raised just enough to suggest confidence without arrogance. No nervous shifting, no wandering gaze. The poise was deliberate, as though every second in silence was calculated to unsettle. Murmurs swelled as delegates speculated about the purpose of this address. Some believed it was another appeal for trade protections, perhaps a plea for support against piracy on the outer lanes. Others scoffed that humanity was prone to melodrama and would waste the council's time. A deep, resonant gong cut across the chamber, silencing the crowd. The council speaker, a massive being with crystalline growth spiraling from its torso, extended a limb of refracted light and signaled for quiet. The delegate of Soul has the floor. Every eye, compound and otherwise, turned. The human diplomat stepped forward into the center of the hall. Light poured from above, isolating the figure in a halo of illumination. Against the enormity of the chamber, the human appeared fragile, their species' biology offering no natural defense or obvious intimidation. And yet, something in the stillness commanded attention. The hall, so used to spectacle, leaned into that quiet. The first words were spoken in standard, clear and sharp, resonating without embellishment. Esteemed council members, I come before you not as a petitioner, but as the voice of a people under assault. The sound of it jarred the room. Few species use such direct phrasing in the opening of a speech. Protocol favored layers of courtesy, elaborate deference, and cautious suggestion. To strip all that away was nearly an insult. Several delegates clicked their mandibles in disapproval. One reptilian overlord, scales flashing a disdainful green, hissed, "They begin with accusation? Insolent primates!" The human continued, ignoring the reaction. Their tone did not rise, did not fall into pleading, did not scramble for sympathy. It cut evenly through the stillness. There are those among you who believe humanity will endure what has been done without raising our voice. That we are too young, too untested, too insignificant to demand acknowledgement. I stand here to tell you that such assumptions end today. The effect was disquieting. Whispers flickered again across the chamber. Some were indignant. Others frowned in curiosity. The speaker's crystalline limbs froze, refracting beams of fractured light onto the human as if even it were uncertain how to proceed. A delegation of avian creatures, plumage bristling in irritation, muttered among themselves. They do not understand the scale of this chamber. They presume to speak as equals. Their voices carried enough to be overheard. But the human did not falter. Instead, the silence around their measured words only amplified their weight. Those who studied humanity closely, few though they were, noticed something different in this representative. There was no trace of desperation, no begging for aid as when young civilizations face disasters beyond their reach. This human bore an edge, a controlled tension that suggested something more than grief or fear. It carried the restrained heat of anger held in leash, sharpened and honed into conviction. And conviction was something the council, with all its centuries of political theater, had nearly forgotten how to face. The chamber, accustomed to dismissing human voices, now found itself leaning forward despite instinct. The human's words hung in the air with an iron weight, preparing to strike a note none had anticipated. What was once expected to be trivial had become something else entirely, an intrusion of raw certainty into a place of endless caution. The human's voice fell silent for a moment, and the weight of expectation pressed against the chamber. Delegates shifted uneasily in their seats, some muttering, others waiting for clarification. It was one thing to open boldly, it was another to sustain such defiance. Then, with deliberate calm, the diplomat spoke again. "Your hesitation tells me you already know what I am about to say. One of you has struck at us, not on the frontier, not at the edges of claim or influence, but at the heart of who we are." The words snapped through the air like a fracture. Ripples of shock coursed across the assembly. Questions erupted in overlapping languages, voices rising in disbelief. A cephalid matron pulsed a warning biolight, signaling her brood to remain still. A crystalline elder emitted a cascade of harsh chimes, demanding clarification. Few grasped the implication at once, but those who did froze in horror. The diplomat let the storm of reactions wash over the chamber before answering. This was no mining colony, no distant listening post. This was Earth. The uproar was instant. For the first time in centuries, the chamber descended into chaos. Laughter, denial, and outrage mingled into a cacophony. A scaled general bared its teeth in mocking disbelief. Impossible! Who would waste resources on such a trivial world? Another voice hissed from the avian block. Exaggeration. Humans seek pity. Their frontier burns, and they call it their home. The human's gaze did not waver. I do not exaggerate. Our capital world, our birth world, has been attacked. Your silence in the face of such an act only confirms how little you value us. But hear me clearly, this was not an inconvenience. It was an atrocity. Delegates erupted again, but underneath their outrage was unease. To assault a homeworld was more than provocation, it was taboo. Empires warred over resources, fought along borders, and occasionally annihilated colonies, but to strike the cradle of a species was to invite extinction wars. The precedent was burned into galactic memory. Civilizations that violated this boundary often vanished within generations. The fact that humanity stood here, accusing openly, rattled the pillars of assumed order. A booming voice rose above the din, belonging to the representative of the Dravari Dominion, a reptilian empire feared for its fleets. Its amber eyes narrowed as it pointed a claw. You dare accuse? Provide your proof, or be silent. The human lifted a small device, activating a projection. Grainy, fragmented, but undeniable, streams of data filled the chamber. Distress signals, images of orbital fire, trajectories of debris, all bearing timestamps and coordinates locked to Earth's orbit. Survivors' recordings bled through, fractured voices, screams cut short, alarms howling into static. The council chamber, so used to sterile debate, recoiled at the raw immediacy of it. The Dravari snapped its jaws, but the hesitation in its posture betrayed unease. Fabrication. Humans would craft false images to gain sympathy. The human answered evenly. These fragments were recovered from wreckage by neutral traders. Cross-check them with your own archives. You will find they align precisely. Deny the truth if you wish, but it will not erase the evidence, nor the screams of the dying. An insected envoy scraped its limbs together nervously. Even if true, who would benefit? Humanity holds no strategic assets worth such escalation. The diplomat's eyes hardened. You assume value only lies in resources. To strike at a homeworld is not about minerals or trade. It is about annihilation of identity. Someone here believed humanity could be erased in one blow. The accusation lingered like smoke in the chamber. The gathered powers shifted uncomfortably, each calculating the consequences. If the claim was true, and if the aggressor was unmasked, the repercussions could tear alliances apart. And if humanity was bold enough to level this accusation publicly, perhaps they were already preparing to act beyond the Council's reach. The Dravari representative hissed again, scales quivering with visible tension. We are not fools. We would never risk the entire Council's wrath by striking a cradle world. If humanity believes otherwise, then they are blind. The human tilted their heads slightly, voice steady. Blind? No. Patient. We have watched. We have measured your silence. And now we speak. The room fell into a brittle quiet. For once, no laughter followed, no derision. What remained was unease, thick and growing heavier with every second the human refused to cower. The accusation had landed. Whether the Council wished to admit it or not, the chamber could no longer pretend humanity was. The silence stretched until it felt heavier than sound itself. Every delegate weighed the words, searching for weakness, but none came. The humans stood unwavering, and when they spoke again, the chamber leaned in despite itself. You struck not at soldiers. You struck at families. At children who never lifted a weapon, at elders who never saw beyond their sky. You thought it would break us. You thought humanity would bow its head, beg for mercy, and fade into memory. But you misunderstand what Earth is. The voice carried like tempered steel. Earth is more than a world. It is a story written in blood and fire, a cradle that raised us through trials that would have ended lesser species. We endured famine, plague, wars that consumed continents, disasters that reshaped oceans, and still we stood. We built not because survival was guaranteed, but because survival was earned. Every generation has learned that endurance is the price of existence. And now you expect us to surrender because the cost has come due again? The words struck harder than any evidence could. The chamber, filled with civilizations that had grown comfortable in their power, suddenly glimpsed the iron thread running through humanity's history. Where others measured progress in centuries of stability, humans measured it in scars. A delegate from the avian bloc scoffed, though the sharpness in its tone faltered. And what do you plan to do? Your fleets are fragile, your colonies scattered. You cannot match the strength of established powers. Words cannot shield you. The human's reply was immediate. Weakness does not mean submission. Do you think humanity has never been outmatched before? For all of our history, the strong towered over us. Nature itself sought to erase us, yet we refused to vanish. We have fought wars where the enemy outnumbered us 10-1, where our weapons broke, where our cities burned. And still we rose. Do not mistake our youth in this council for naivety. Every breath we take is carved from defiance. The avian delegate recoiled, feathers flattening. The firmness of that statement was not the desperation of prey, it was the certainty of something far more dangerous. The human continued, voice steady as stone. We do not come here asking for vengeance to be delivered by others. We come to tell you that humanity will not forget. That whoever struck at Earth has sown a seed of reckoning. We will seek justice, with or without your sanction. That is not a threat. It is a truth you cannot alter. Several envies bristled. To act without council approval was heresy against order. Yet the human's conviction bent the unspoken rules. Some realized with unease that if Earth truly burned, humanity had already crossed the threshold from diplomacy into inevitability. A crystalline elder broke the silence with a measured chime. You speak as though you alone stand against the galaxy. Do you not fear annihilation? The human's eyes glinted. Annihilation is only possible when one accepts defeat. We have faced extinction many times, and each time we endured because we refused to bow. If you believe destroying Earth ends humanity, then you have learned nothing of what we are. We carry our home within us. Our will is not bound to soil or stone. As long as one of us breathes, Earth lives. The chamber shifted. This was not arrogance. It was clarity, sharpened into something that frightened even those who dismissed humanity moments before. Civilizations that ruled by power understood the logic of deterrence, but this was not deterrence. This was a refusal to acknowledge defeat as even possible. The human's tone deepened. We will mourn our dead. We will remember their names. And then we will act. Do not mistake our patience for weakness. Every second you spend doubting us is a second we spend preparing. Strike our children, And you will learn what it means when humanity stops holding back. The statement hung like a blade in the chamber. No one moved to answer. For the first time in living memory, a young species had spoken to the council not as a supplicant, but as an equal, declaring resolve sharper than any weapon. The silence was no longer dismissal, it was the recognition of something they could not ignore. The human did not pause for reaction. Their words cut forward like a blade that refused to dull. You believe humanity stands alone. You believe we are a solitary voice in the void. You are wrong. A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. Delegates exchanged glances, calculations flashing behind alien eyes. The suggestion of alliances unsettled them. Few young species ever succeeded in binding others to their cause. Yet the human's composure betrayed no doubt. While you looked down on us, while you dismissed us as inconsequential, others watched closely. They saw what you ignored. They saw a people who do not surrender. They saw strength in persistence, courage in survival, and a will that does not fracture. Those who share our spirit now stand beside us. Do not imagine that your dismissal kept us friendless. The words landed like shockwaves. The chamber stirred, fragments of surprise muttering through the ranks. Minor species had always circled the great powers, hoping for protection, rarely daring to defy the council's hierarchy. Yet now the image formed, smaller nations aligning under humanity's banner, bound not by fear but by admiration. The human pressed the point. You underestimate how deeply respect grows in the shadow of struggle. Those who watched us endure famine and fire without collapse, those who witnessed our colonies rebuilt after devastation, know that humanity will not be erased. They have pledged ships, supplies, and trust. The alliances you considered impossible already exist. The chamber grew colder with realization. If this was true, then humanity was no longer a lone upstart. It was a catalyst, drawing the overlooked into unity. The diplomat's voice lowered, weighted with certainty. And do not think our defenses remain primitive. We have studied every conflict recorded in your archives. We have examined your strategies, your mistakes, and your victories. Every empire here has taught us something, whether they wished to or not. We have taken what we learned, and we have built weapons designed for adaptation. Our fleets shift their tactics in moments. Our soldiers train to fight without reliance on one pattern. Where others stagnate in tradition, humanity evolves. The claim silenced those who had scoffed. Adaptation was feared above strength, for adaptability meant unpredictability. Powers that had relied on centuries of dominance suddenly felt their confidence bend. The human's voice cut deeper still. We do not boast of endless armies or planets numbered in the thousands. What we possess is far more dangerous, resolve sharpened by necessity. We innovate because failure means extinction. We unite because division means annihilation. You see weakness in our numbers. We see clarity. Every life matters. Every loss hardens us. Every strike teaches us how to strike back harder. The Dravari, still fuming from earlier, bared its teeth in open defiance. And you believe this will save you? You think to rise against the Dominion with scraps and promises? The human did not flinch. We believe nothing. We know. And you should understand what that knowledge means. When you strike at those with everything to lose, they fight carefully. But when you strike at those who believe they have already lost the most precious thing they own, they become something else entirely. They become relentless. The room stiffened. Delegates who had thought themselves immune to intimidation now shifted uneasily. The truth cut through the chamber. Humanity was no longer arguing for survival. They were declaring inevitability. Do you comprehend what it means when a people feel they have nothing left to lose? The diplomat continued. It means limits vanish. It means hesitation dies. It means we will stop at nothing, not for conquest, not for empire, but for the defense of what was taken from us. That is what makes us dangerous. Not our fleets, not our weapons, but the will that refuses to die. The words fell like stone into water, spreading ripples that reached every corner of the assembly. For centuries, the council had believed fear came from power. Now they glimpsed something more profound, fear born from certainty that cannot be shaken. The human's gaze swept the chamber. You can deny, you can laugh, you can conspire. But know this, our resolve has already changed the balance of this council. You cannot put us back into silence. The moment you struck at Earth, you created something you will never control. You created humanity unbound. No delegate answered. For the first time, silence was not dismissal. It was fear. The chamber had grown so still that every breath seemed to echo. Delegates who once spoke over one another now held their tongues, calculating. The accusation was no longer just an outburst from a young species. It was a declaration of intent. The weight of it pressed against every faction in the room, and for the first time in living memory, the council faced a truth they could not dismiss. One of the crystalline elders broke the quiet with deliberate resonance. This council must deliberate. If proof is as strong as you claim, consequences cannot be ignored. An attack on a cradle world destabilizes us all. Yet immediately voices rose in conflict. A coalition of older powers demanded restraint, urging humanity to submit their findings for further inquiry. Others argued for immediate punishment of the accused, warning that inaction would shatter the council's credibility. The chamber splintered into rival currents, unity dissolving into chaos. Through the noise, the human remained still, gaze steady, expression calm. When the room reached fever pitch, the diplomat's voice cut through once more, commanding silence without force. You may debate. You may postpone. But understand this, humanity does not wait for your permission. We will act. That is not negotiable. The words struck harder than weapons fire. To openly defy council process was unthinkable. Delegates recoiled, some in outrage, others in apprehension. A reptilian warlord hissed. You would break the order that binds us? You would plunge this chamber into disorder? The human's reply was unwavering. Order that ignores justice is already broken. You may cling to protocol while lives burn. We will not. Our course is set. The force of the statement shifted the balance in the room. Those who had mocked humanity now weighed them as a factor to be feared. No longer the insignificant voice of a minor race, but a force ready to move outside the council's control. The possibility alone unsettled the great empires, who built their dominance on the assumption that all species would bow to collective will. The human's voice lowered, but the steel within it sharpened. We did not seek this. We did not choose to have our home struck. But choice has been taken from us. When choice is denied, only resolve remains. Whoever carried out this act will face us. Whether the council joins us or stands aside, history will remember how humanity answered. The words carried an inevitability that silenced even the boldest delegates. Some shifted uncomfortably, imagining what it meant to confront a species that would not measure survival by territory or numbers, but by refusal to submit. That kind of enemy could not be negotiated down with bribes or fear. The elder's crystalline tones returned, more subdued now. If you act, you risk igniting a war that could engulf half the known systems. The human's answer came without hesitation. If you believe war begins with humanity's response, then you blind yourselves to the truth. War began when Earth was attacked. We are only recognizing reality. The starkness of that statement spread unease like wildfire. Some delegates muttered in low tones, realizing the fragile order of the council was already fractured. Others, particularly from smaller nations long overshadowed, looked at the human with new eyes, seeing not recklessness, but clarity. The diplomat allowed the silence to settle once more before delivering the final words. You may question our strength, but you cannot question our will. That is what you failed to understand. We do not stand here to ask for mercy. We stand to promise that the fire you unleashed will not be contained until justice is done. Remember this moment well, for when the chronicles of the future are written, this will be the day you realized humanity is not a guest in this chamber. We are its equal. The hall remained frozen. No rebuttals came. No dismissive laughter followed. For the first time, humanity had shifted the air of the council itself. Delegates felt the ground beneath their assumptions fracture. The image of a fragile, naive species had been burned away and replaced with something they could neither predict nor control. The human diplomat bowed their head once, a gesture of finality rather than submission, and turned to leave the floor. Behind them, silence lingered like an open wound. The echoes of their words remained, sharper than any weapon. What came next was uncertain, but one truth had already settled across the council. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and now it would reckon with the consequences.